interesting. George, I'm going to start a two-part question with you, okay? I'm going to give everybody a shot at telling us if we were going to go and see one documentary, other than our own films, okay? What documentary would you point to and say, this is the way you do it, okay? And I'll start with George on that. But from that, what I want to move to is the heart of everything. And you got at it a little bit, Biagio, a little bit earlier. It's like a lot of this comes out of your own pocket. How do you fund these? In your case, you have to figure out how you're going to fund the archiving of these films as well, I'm imagining as well.
It's not my job, but that is a big part of it.
Okay, so talk about briefly what film that you've seen, a documentary that you would like to see people emulate or.
I think one of my favorite documentary filmmakers, quite early one, is Frederick Wiseman, who started in the late 50s, early 60s with a film called Titicut Follies, where he went into an asylum in Massachusetts. And somehow, and I don't know how he was able to do this, but he went in there and was given a free rein to shoot in this asylum the goings-on day to day until he finally had created this film around it. And when the film came out, the state of Massachusetts basically had it banned, got it banned. So it was not seen publicly for almost 40 years. And it is a pretty raw piece of film to sit through. But Frederick Wiseman then developed, which he's still doing to this day, this way of shooting where he basically integrates himself into the world that he wants to shoot, and just every day he just shoots and he shoots and he shoots and he shoots, and then he creates this the film. There's no narration or anything in it. It just tells this story, and each one is just a very very simple scenario. There's one called High School. There's one called The Store. And just to me, it really speaks to me because there's not, again, the stentorian narrator there going, this is the way things were back in love. And it's just, I don't know, it's just the kind of thing that if I were going to do a documentary, it was something I would like to do. Just kind of like let the audience sit there and take it in and kind of totally, or partially anyways, make up their own mind about what they're seeing. And of course, you as the director are showing them what you want them to see, but you're not adding any extra layers to it by doing that, by adding narration or titles or whatever.
Do you want to address the funding issue?
The funding issue. Well, the Library of Congress is very interesting in that our motion picture division, since we are the Library of Congress, we are funded as part of Congress. And we are given a certain amount of money every year to do film preservation. The nice thing about the Library of Congress's program is, as opposed to, let's say, UCLA or George Eastman House or Museum of Modern Art, is that when one of those groups decides to fund the preservation of a film, be it fictional or documentary, they kind of have to look at it as something they can then get that money back from, because their funding is much more limited than ours is. Not that ours is big. The freedom that we have with the funding that we receive is the ability to preserve things that not necessarily we preserve them to get the money back, but we preserve them because for whatever reason, they're important. Whether it be a Hollywood feature, a documentary on dentistry, or a little film. We preserved a little film about the James Whitcomb Riley Hospital for Children in Indiana, which was, I think, the first hospital built for children. And it's not a long film, and it's not a film that people would run out and want to see, but it documents the day-to-day activities of this first hospital for children back in the 1920s. Just amazing footage. And as far as we know, we had the only existing copy of this film. So now it is preserved. If a researcher is doing something on Children's Hospital, it's there in the Library of Congress. They can go there, they can view it, they can get copies of it or photographs from it. So now, of course, if anyone's been keeping track of the news lately, the funding issue is becoming quite a hot button issue. And but fortunately, we're not getting, of course, we never get what we ask for, but we always get enough to keep going. And we find ways of keeping going too. And if nothing else, the secondary attack we can do is to take the material that we have that has not been preserved and put it into a proper atmosphere to keep it until the time comes when we can preserve it. That's our other big thing.
Leo, your turn with the two-parter here.
Okay. Films that interest me, I mentioned before, the one, Peter Mettler, he's a Canadian documentary, and he made a film called Gambling Gods and LSD was his last film. Then Peter Lichty is a Swiss director who made this film about this man who goes into the woods to die. And then there's then these German, Humbert and Pencil, who made a film called Step Across the Border, which documented the experimental music scene in New York. Fred Frith, I think it was in the late 80s, early 90s. And all three of these films have something, or all three of these filmmakers, although Humbert and Pencil are two filmmakers who work together, they have a way of going about making films which interests me in that they are very, they let the films tell the story. I think it's close to something that you were saying, George, which is that, not that they are telling you what to think, they're presenting the material in such a way that you as a viewer are allowed to decide for yourself. And I think the film Step Across the Border by Humbert and Pencil about Fred Frith and the experimental music scene, the most amazing thing about it is there's no interview about what they're doing. They never even talk about what they're doing. They're doing it. And they do talk about things, but it's not directly about what it is. And at the end of the film, you know what that music's about. You know it. You don't even have, nobody could explain it to you. But how it's not only what the musicians are doing, it's what the filmmakers are doing. It's how they're filming the subject and how their filmmaking is actually experimenting in the same way that the musicians are experimenting. And it becomes very clear by the end that this is what this music is about. And then it's very personal for the viewer. Me as a viewer, I have access to this thing, a personal access now that nobody else told me about or explained to me. And this is, I think this is very strong. This is the essence to me. If I could communicate a story in this way that the viewer creates their own opinion or their own idea about what it is that they're seeing, and not just arbitrarily, but precisely in a way that I've set it up, then I've achieved a lot as a filmmaker. And the second part.
Yeah, and that is funding, okay?
Funding.
Which is the bear for everybody.
Funding, yes, funding is a bear. I'm Swiss-based, I'm a Swiss-based filmmaker. I live in Switzerland, and my funding, the productions of my first two films have been through Swiss money.
Huh?
Now this is, I think, probably a very different situation than in the States, in that there's a lot of grants for filmmakers. Now the grants are extremely competitive to get. However, there is money. And so that means, you know, like Beyond This Place was funded. I mean, it's a long step and it means a lot of writing. And there's a downside as well. Through the funding is you can't actually go out and start filming. You're not allowed to go out and actually film anything until you've received the funding. So it's a little bit fiction, you know, the idea is, you know, you write the script, when the script gets funded, then you go out and shoot. And it's similar with documentaries, so you have to find little ways around that, and you have to, you know. But there's very good funding, and there's also in Switzerland, there's international co-productions with Canada, with Germany, with France, we have that possibility to have co-production with other countries. Unfortunately, that we can't have there isn't an international co-production set up with the States, which would actually benefit, I think, both Europe and the United States in the documentary scene.
The grants, I'm assuming this is like government funding?
It's
like,
government
so
funding.
the government actually acts as a patron of the arts.
Yes, I mean the main funding is government funding. Then you also have broadcasters. The Swiss broadcasters are owned by the government, so it's public money again, and they are a large. When the broadcaster comes on board, then the government comes on board, kind of like that. Usually in the rule.
Yeah, kind of a different scramble here. What have your experiences been? Sally, do you want to?
Well, again, I bought a camera, and I had worked in the film world for a long time, so I had friends who could shoot that did me favors. I couldn't really get any money, like nobody was interested in paying for this, so it was all on me. And if there are any film students in the room, then sometimes, you know, you've got probably access to cameras here, and sometimes it's best just to find a great subject and a great story and have some kind of plan in your head and pick up a camera and go and do it. And you, especially as a young filmmaker, I think, I wish I had sort of done this a long time ago, but there's so many grants, and writing grants can take, is a whole skill set in itself. And it can take months and months of proposals and back and forth, and meanwhile your story is already the person that you wanted to shoot, you haven't even shot anything yet. And so I think, and I mean, I know you hear this, just do it or just pick up a camera, but I think sometimes as a young filmmaker you learn so much, and it is a very steep learning curve, but it is, I think, sometimes a really great thing just to have a stick. If you think it's a good idea, go and make a short, go and shoot a short doc, and then show somebody and say, look, this is, can you give me some money for a little bit more? I'd like to hire a sound guy sometimes, or I want to buy a lav, I want to buy a mic. That whole sort of do-it-yourself thing can really be a really, really good way to go.
Going back to my part A on this question, because I'm trying to tie art here to finance. Who inspired you?
Well, I mean, the Maisel, I met him actually, Grey Gardens. I mean, everybody a lot of people like that film, but those guys were pretty exciting filmmakers. And recently I went and saw up in Harlem in New York, there was a series of films on the Congo, and I went to this film, and it was dark and I didn't really pay attention to the theatre, and I went, and then there was a Q&A afterwards, and it was really interesting. And then downstairs in the basement they had wine and cheese, and this little guy sat next to me, kind of an older gentleman and really sparkly eyes, and he said, "Did you enjoy it?" And I said, "It was really great, it was really, really interesting." And he said, "This is my theatre." And I was like, "Oh, so you're a filmmaker?" He says, "Yes, you may have seen a couple of my films, Grey Gardens." And I was like, and I love Control Room, I love all kinds of films. And I met that editor at a party once. I was looking for an editor for my film, and there were several, but and I was talking to this guy who somebody had introduced us and said, "Oh, he's in film," and we got talking, and I was like, I'm looking for an editor, and I loved the way Control Room was cut, and he's like, "Oh, I cut that film." So, I like lots of different kinds of films and different styles of docs. Anything that's got a good story and makes you think, and you leave, that whole, you think about it after you've left. Those kind of films are